Hey, how are you doing? It's Toks Aruoture here, the interior designer and founder of the Baby Cut Shop. And I'm just making sure I'm signed into the right account. Yes, I am. So today we're going to be having an interesting conversation, which we're having to pivot a little bit because our guest, Monique Vega, who we're meant to have on as an on the interview, had an emergency and makes her apologies, and she's unable to make it today. But I thought, you know what? I'm a mom and I'm in business, and I can talk to you about life as a mom in business. But I hope your day is going well. Thank you so much for joining. There is a share button on here. It's not going to be a long chat, but there's a share button on there. If you would kindly share, hit the share button so that we can let other people know that I'm having this chat about motherhood. And I would really love and appreciate you talking back to me in the chat and telling me what your experience as a mom has been. So these questions are questions that we were going to ask Monique, but as I mentioned, unfortunately, she had an emergency and had to dash off really quickly. But I hope your day is going well. Thank you for joining. I haven't got my glasses on, so I'm struggling to see the names, but I will be able to see the questions. So, question one, what has been the biggest challenges, or what are the biggest challenges you faced so far as a mother? So to introduce myself, I'm a mom of 4. I have 4 boys. And I mean, they're kind of like boy men now because my kids are older. So I have 4 boys. My first 3 are quite close in age. They were born, numbers 1 and 2 were born 17 months apart. And then 2 years later, I had son number 3. And son number 4 came 5 years later. So we have like a varying amount of gaps in the house between them. The biggest challenge I remember, particularly as a young mom when the boys were young, was having had the babies. And I was chatting with a client of ours yesterday about this, the concern about having a second child when the older child or the first child is still so young, knowing how to balance the time between the two. I was really worried about making sure that my older son did not feel neglected or jealous or left out of all of the excitement of the new baby. So that was a challenge I certainly had. Another challenge I had was all of the conflicting advice that I was getting from family members and friends and everyone. Everyone had something to say. Everyone had their idea of how I was meant to be mothering these boys, how I was meant to look after myself. That was another challenge, because if you're blessed to have a lot of family members, or you belong to a circle where there are tons of friends, you have a lot of friends, a lot of your mates are also having babies, you're going to find that you're getting so many conflicting information. If you've had that information, you've had a baby or 2, please put your comments in the chat to let me know I'm not on my own on this one. So you get a lot of conflicting information. You've got information from your midwife, you have information from the health visitor, you have information from Google and from all the pregnancy books and magazines and articles. Then you get information from influencers and other famous moms, and then you've got your own family, and then you've got your friends. So it can be challenging and overwhelming, especially in those early months when you're just trying to find your feet as a mom. Another thing as well I noticed is that even though I had done the journey of motherhood once, going the second time was a completely unique and different experience. So your challenges then change because, okay, now I know that if my baby cries for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, they're okay. Maybe not 10, but 5 minutes, they're okay, and nothing bad's going to happen to them. It doesn't mean the world has come to an end. So now I know that. However, how do I know that the baby doesn't feel neglected, or how do I know that my toddler isn't feeling neglected? That's a new experience when you're doing this the second time around. So you will find that every single baby, every single pregnancy, every single birth presents a complete new set of challenges. So when the question is asked, what are the challenges you had as a mom? It's different for each time. There is no one answer. So that's what I would say. What are the biggest misconceptions about being a mom in business? I think it depends. It really does depend on whether you are viewed, whether you're working from home or you're working outside the home. So a mom in business or a mom in career. I think the biggest misconception is, well, you work for yourself and therefore you have all the time in the world and you have the best of both worlds. And that is a misconception. Working for yourself does not necessarily make it any easier than if you were working for someone else. So a misconception for sure is the thought or the imagination that people have that you can balance the two quite easily because you've got your own business, then you can bring your baby to work, or you can do your work at home with the baby. That doesn't always happen. That's a misconception. When you work for yourself, you sort of work 24/7. Sorry, you work 48/7. You work 48 hours a week, 48 hours a day, if possible, 7 days a week. It's non-stop. And there's always going to be the tussle between your first baby, which really is the business, and your real baby. So that's a misconception. No, we don't have all the time in the world, and it's still as stressful. I'm not going to compare the stress levels because everyone is different and every circumstance is different. So I'm not going to get into the debate of which is easier, owning your own business or working for someone else and having a baby. I just know that it's not the easiest job in the world. Loving the topics. Thank you. Please drop any questions you have in the comment box, questions or comments. How do you deal with mommy guilt? My goodness. My oldest son is 23. The next one down is 21. And then I have a 19-year-old and a 15-year-old. And you would think that I'm done with mommy guilt. And that's not the case. I still deal with mommy guilt. I still struggle every week, a few times a week at least. I still feel that I'm spending too much time at work and not enough time with the boys. When they were very young, the whole idea of, well, they're developing and you want to bond with them, that would be your reason. As they've gotten older, their needs change. When you're dealing with teenagers, it's a whole new set of rules. Their requirements are different. You need to make sure that you're there for them emotionally. And with boys who are not necessarily as expressive in their emotions, it means that you've sort of got to do double time. So I found mommy guilt is something that has literally run the thread of my journey as a mom, and it hasn't stopped. Last night I felt guilty. One of my sons went off to work, and I had to he went to work and didn't come back home till quite late, and that's my 19-year-old. And I had to remind myself that work is good for him because I was feeling guilty. I grew up in Nigeria, and it's not part of our culture for kids to work in Nigeria. So I had to struggle, and I had to fight, and I had to remind myself why it was necessary for them to work so they can grow up with a good work ethic. So how do I deal with it? I remind myself of the reason I'm doing what I'm doing. Something else I do as well is I have a system that I use where all of my tasks and all of the areas of my life are divided into columns in my mind, not necessarily on paper, but in my mind they're divided into columns, and I make sure that I know the barest minimum that each section of my life needs to have. So for example, every time I have a one-to-one conversation with one of my sons, I am loving my child. Every time I pick up a sock from the floor or do laundry, I'm loving my home. Every time I create a delicious meal for the family, I'm loving my family, I'm blessing them. And so knowing that I'm doing the barest minimum in these areas helps me to remember that I don't need to be guilty in these areas. But I think it's always going to be there. It's just reminding yourself and having a system in place for dealing with it. And my last question is, what techniques can mothers use when she starts to feel overwhelmed? So it's similar to what I just said, but I think I'm going to throw in another one. Journaling is my number one tool in the world. I cannot overstate the benefits of journaling. And I do my journaling in the mornings. I do that by waking up before everyone else wakes up so that I can have a few hours to myself before the whole house is awake. And it's necessary for me to have that me time. So journaling is really important. On there, I throw my thoughts on in no particular order. I literally just bang my thoughts on paper. Once my thoughts are on there, then I start to sort through them one by one. And a lot of times I find that I am obsessing over one situation, but it's presenting itself in 5 or 6 different ways. So you might be overwhelmed because you have so much on your mind, but when you put it on paper, you'll find that actually I only have 2 real issues on my mind. It's just that they're showing up in different ways. So that's one way to prevent overwhelm, sort of giving you 2 there. Time alone by yourself is essential, and also making sure that you journal. Another way to journal is through gratitude. If you're feeling really overwhelmed and you've emptied everything on and you're still feeling a little bit over the top, just write a gratitude list the things that you're thankful for, from your health to your life to the people in your life to your job, your business, whatever it is. Gratitude, I find, goes a long way. So I'm going to stop now because this was really supposed to be a conversation between 2 people, and we are going to have the new dates rescheduled. And if you joined halfway through, we're certainly going to post this replay so that you can watch it again. But thank you so much for joining in, and Merry Christmas.